So the new update is here for the Korean server. This brings the damage cap nerf to Detonation Mark, and it's actually way worse than we expected. This skill has become nearly useless. So in this video I'll cover my test data along with the formula on how badly it is affected. We can go over the rest of the skill changes like the buffs that staff got, the nerfs to Orb, a little bit of a shop update here for the Korean server, how they've switched over to solo ranked Battlegrounds, and there's finally the ability to directly upgrade the Delos Noah and Giant Cordy skill cores. They've also made it so the imprint scroll is much cheaper, there should be heroic sync, and this next week's trial is Island of Terror. These were the full patch notes that we saw earlier, so let's confirm these changes in-game, at least from what I can show you so far. So the first thing mentioned in the patch notes was shield stacking. Now don't worry, this only affects between multiple different players. Just you yourself, you can still have the shield of Invincible Wall plus Distortion Veil. You can see right here, Distortion Veil, 5,400, and Invincible Wall will simply stack on top of that to giving us 12,000. And this is with some scuffed stats, so you can get those values way higher. But that's just to confirm, you can still stack these with your own skills, just not with another player's of the exact same skill. Again, to avoid people getting insane levels of shields when stacking with multiple oracles in a group. Unfortunately, the Junobote Spear, they did not change the tooltip or the skill effect back to how they originally had it at the beginning of Tier 3. It's still the old Tier 1 version, and the update simply brought a small fix to prevent it from damaging your allies. Similarly, the Tier 1 version of the Tevent Wand no longer has the 100% monster damage bonus, as you may have noticed in the previous update. They've changed it so only the Tier 2 version has that 100% monster damage, which, yes, just feels really bad, and maybe this is still a mistake and there may be hope they re-add it to the Tier 1 version, as that would make Wand DPS at least that bit more accessible versus having to have the Tier 2 upgraded version, which you need 90 Ashen Abyss Fragments. That will just take a while for a new player to get. Although they did double the amount of fragments you get just by participating in those events, and they happen once a week if you include the Guild War one. But that's still 10 weeks to get 90 of these Ashen Abyss fragments. Before we get into the details of the Crossbow nerf and what this actually means, let's confirm the staff buffs. Focused Firebombs here is indeed nearly 600% of base damage. Ice Spear is now 510%, with each shard of Ice Spear Bombardment being 102%. And finally, Judgment Lightning at max level is now 880%. That confirms the patch notes are indeed correct. But then looking at the Orb Nerfs, we can see here what they've actually done is, yes, reduce the base damage of the skill, but now added 100% monster damage bonus. So don't panic. Yes, the skill will show 290% of base damage versus the global server saying 580%. So they did half its damage output, but since it deals now double damage against monsters with that extra 100%, it's the same damage in PvE. No nerf there. The big nerf is PvP. Yes, it will now deal half the amount of its damage that we have on the global server. But again, only affecting PvP. And Supernova should no longer have the movement speed reduction, and we can confirm the tooltip's been updated and it no longer says it has that. And yes, additionally, the Orb effect on Starlight Dash is also halved down to 96% from the normal 191%. But again, with the 100% monster damage bonus, that means there's no change in PvE for the overall damage output. So now let's look at my testing on the new change with Detonation Mark. We can indeed see in the tooltip it now states damage accumulates up to 50,000% of base damage. I had done some speculation wondering what this would really mean, but now I've done some proper tests. And what is crazy is we're already hitting the damage cap here. Just by using Detonation Mark on the target, and then focused firebombs. This right here is giving less damage than it should have. The Detonation Mark only dealt 48,199 when it should have dealt over 55,000 if it was a true 80%. However, it has already hit the damage cap. I dealt over 69,000 damage across that heavy attack, and I had 2 stacks of Detonation Mark. So yes, with this formula, we should have gotten 55,000. And we can confirm that with damage where we don't reach the cap. And this is matching the expected formula. You can see this is using these values of base damage, as I am testing with just a grey crossbow. And this is with some stat changes. I wanted to confirm this with different levels of base damage, so we made these tests and also went to global to confirm that yes, this is how it's working, the formula checks out, and it's not currently capped on global. You can see these other tests on the Korean server, again hitting that cap. We should be dealing over 61,000 damage, and we're hitting the cap of 28,999 times 2, which is when we had 2 detonation stacks. So that also does confirm when you do have 2 stacks, you can effectively have a cap of 100,000 accumulated damage. However, the formula does not seem to be checking out with how I expected it to. This is a seriously low amount of damage. You can see screenshots of multiple of these tests, and I have the recordings too, as we're clearly hitting that damage cap on our Detonation Mark. And I compiled the test results here. So with these values of our crossbow base damage, we were getting 28,999 to be the cap with 1 stack of detonation. 2 stacks is simply just double that. If we look at the damage formula, this is completely wonky. This 28,999 is as if we just had 58 base damage, when in reality we have between 60 and 229. So something is seriously wrong with the formula, as the cap is seriously under the amount I expected. Potentially it's doing something like this, which is taking the average between the min total and then the min base, which would just be super weird. But ultimately what this means is your Detonation Mark cap is effectively going to be your minimum base damage on your crossbow times 500, and even a bit less than that. So if I go on the global server here, my near maxed out Fury build, my crossbow 146. This would mean my Detonation Mark cap is 73,000. This being with 1 stack. So double that with 2 stacks, meaning 146,000. So instead of hitting 1,000,000 damage on my boss with Detonation Mark, it'll just be 146,000. Yeah, take that for a nerf. I bet you didn't expect it to be that severe. I'll leave a link in the video description below to this test data and this PvE damage formula, and you can mess around with it for yourself, and maybe you can find the correct correlation as to why it seems to be using even less than your minimum base damage of your crossbow here. Like instead of 51, it's using 47. Instead of 60, it's using basically 58. And again, it really shouldn't use the min base damage. It should be using at least the average between the two, if not your max base damage. So yes, this nerf, this cap, is absolutely huge. Going from 1,000,000 per pop of Detonation Mark on my Fury, you can get even higher than that on Crucifix, to just 146,000 max. Basically 1,000 times your minimum weapon base damage. And due to the wonkiness of the formula, it's going to be even a little bit less than that. I will of course have to do some more thorough testing, and I will do so after I get some sleep, and ultimately when this patch comes to global on Thursday. But yes, the nerf is really severe. But let's have a look at some other things that this patch is bringing. They're adding a bit of new content with regards to the flying whales. You can create this bed and these lamps, and also purchase some flooring and wallpaper that they've newly added to the shop here for 750 lucent to match the theme of those 2 whales. So you could, yes, outfit your house in this kind of a theme. Looks really cool, but I really haven't done anything with housing, so I guess I'll be missing out. And I don't really plan to start when they've confirmed housing is not going to give anything in the way of character progress. So it's completely optional content, fine by me if I don't have to do it. As for Battlegrounds, on the Korean server, they've changed it over to a solo queue. It started out as needing a party of 6 to queue. I'm guessing they didn't get great numbers with it, and so they've changed it. They also appear to have it only available on Saturday and Sunday at set times. Now these times are local for me, and I live over in Ireland, so yes, they're completely wonky times when the server's over in Korea. I assume this is going to be like peak times, probably from 12 in the afternoon to 12 at night. But they also have a time restriction for their normal queues, and it appears those normal queues will not be available on the weekends. That's a pretty odd decision, but I guess it's to funnel people towards that particular game mode and get people playing that. If you really don't want to do ranked, you may have to do it during the week. But again, if it's solo queue, that puts everybody on a pretty level playing field, and it could well be a better experience than the normal queue where you can run into, yes, statics, which can just completely dominate the place. And they should be adding some rewards that you can purchase here rather than freely claim. Like, you need to spend 5 million solent just for a Chaos Rune. I'm not sure why you have to pay solent for that, but I guess it's just another sink for solent. As for the skill cores, yes, they finally added the recipes to directly upgrade your skill core. If you had already extracted it from a tier 2 Archboss weapon, you can now collect those materials and directly upgrade it, rather than converting it to the weapon here, upgrading that. But at least they do have the option to convert a skill core into a weapon if you regretted your choice on that and wanted to switch a build and then use a different heroic. So that's good news, and they should be increasing the combat power that those Archboss weapons give you once fully maxed out. But they also say here, as we saw earlier, that we should be able to transfer different heroic gear between different types, like a cloak with boots, necklace with earrings, but this is not something I can confirm. I have no heroic equipment on the Korean server. I really don't play there. My character's just built on freebies. Similarly, the sync system for the heroic gear, they claim you can only sync between identical parts. So this would mean you can sync exactly like how it is here and not like a cloak with some arms. So there's still a bit of restriction to that. But yes, that still needs to be confirmed. I cannot do so without any heroic equipment on the Korean server. Some of you are thinking this is just some translation thing and it relates to the transfer system, but I don't see why they would have this in a separate section and have link there if it wasn't referring to the sync system. I'm sure you can confirm with Whelps when he streams the Korean server and he does have heroic gear that the sync system is a thing, which is just completely weird. And maybe they won't even add it to global because of what Tico was saying, and they only plan to have it here in the Korean server, which would just feel pretty bad. But they did just come out with that heroic pass. Everybody got tons of materials to upgrade all of their heroic equipment. And if you ended up upgrading, say, a second weapon, you may feel a bit scammed that all of a sudden they've done a 180 and decided, oh, we are actually going to release the sync system now. And I think it would only be fair that those players who did upgrade multiple weapons would get compensated and given back all the materials that they spent on that, all the growth stones, so that they can invest it properly into their armor and accessory pieces if they didn't max those out already. Be sure to complain to customer support if they don't give us compensation for that, and do introduce the sync system, especially if you bought the heroic pass with the mindset to be able to upgrade additional weapons. But yeah, that's about it for the patch here, and everything that I've seen so far that's changed on the Korean server, and we should be getting this update later tonight or Thursday morning for us in EU. And we can see the next trial is Island of Terror. So you can already look at some guides for that, but tier 1, if you're simply just going for the accumulated points rewards, it is super easy and exactly like the 2-star dungeon, other than him having a bit more health, as he'll be scaled to the level of a 4-star dungeon. Again, Detonation Mark getting a massive nerf with its damage being capped and way worse than expected. If you want to roughly calculate for yourself, just multiply your base damage here, the minimum value, 146 times 500, and that would be the cap for your character. So for me, just 73,000. But again, double that if you take into account of having 2 stacks of Detonation Mark. If this update goes through like this to the global server, it will mean RIP Fury. You will be dealing absolutely no competitive damage at all. Crucifix will still be one of the top damage dealers, as they didn't even need Detonation Mark to still have that lead ahead in damage versus other classes. But it does also mean classes like Staff Wand, Staff Orb will be closing the gap to it. But again, with its Detonation Mark cap nerf, anything using Crossbow in PvE is basically gonna suck. The entire weapon just loses all damage. By itself, the weapon has terrible PvE damage output. All these skills, you're only using them to support the damage output of your second weapon. And without Detonation Mark properly contributing like 80% more damage of your other weapon, it basically makes it pretty pointless to run Crossbow. You're just far better off running anything else that actually has some viable damage output skills. So just expect, Fury, pretty much useless. Same with Scorpion, Battle Weaver, Scout, all no longer viable for any good damage in boss fights. At least if the change really goes through like this. They did post a list of known issues, but all that's on there is they've broken Battlegrounds now for the Korean server, exactly like they did for us on Global. The number of weekly win rewards is deducted even when losing on the battlefield and will be fixed with another maintenance for them. And also, there are some intermittent issues where just attacks and skills cannot be used. Sounds like a mess. But hopefully this was somewhat insightful. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news for any of you who enjoy playing a Crossbow build that isn't Crucifix or IP. A special thank you again to all these channel members for your extra support, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.